I'm Eirik Brandal, and I present this series of electronic sculptures in Kapelica Gallery in Ljubljana. So these sculptures are what we call based on freeform electronics, which is to take the more traditional circuit board and you remove the substrate, the copper plate that is normally found in circuits, and you just make a construction out of the traces that you would normally see on this board. So this kind of freeform style was maybe pioneered by the radio enthusiasts in the 60s and 70s and 80s, when they only had these very simple copper plates that they almost glued components to, and that kind of form was easy to prototype. You could do it at home, and that substrate I had in that dead bug type or Manhattan style was also very good to shield against external signals, which is good for their radios. So this style I'm building is called freeform rather, and it's not used for radio, but it's used for analog electronics that creates sounds or lights. So the style of these sculptures are often based on basic geometric forms and shapes, like squares and triangles and circles, just like they did in the suprematism and the constructivism parts of the early modern era. So we had artists like Tatlin and Galbo, and those are big favorites of mine, especially Galbo with these fantastic curves. I wanted to talk about this improbable architecture like Tatlin. You know, he made these drawings that were almost impossible to realize. But my sculptures, of course, are realized, so it doesn't really belong in the topic. So there is this style of, or this thing in architecture called paper architecture, and it consists of these drawings and ideas that are so improbable to actually realize that they are confined to paper. So a lot of those drawings from that kind of paper architecture idea has a big impact on my designs, and also these paper architecture ideas like Tatlin's tower are also from this constructivist period. So yeah, the basic idea is to just have these geometric shapes and intersect them in different ways and build on top, like in Xenakis's Phillips Pavilion. He had these. He has this really fluid shape, but everything is straight lines, and that idea was quite profound for me in the beginning. So I tried to use straight lines as much as possible to create these really fluid shapes. So yeah, that's from the Le Corbusier and Xenakis Pavilion. So I have a background in music composition. I have a master's degree in composition from The Hague. So everything I do with sound is filtered through this school of thought of having a composition of a structure of sound. So most of the sculptures I make are using sound as a tool to communicate the process of the sculpture, the electrical process, which you might call sonification, which is communication through sound of an non-living entity. So in my sculptures, there's always like a brain or some process that is controlling the sound and the lights. And I like to take this, the process itself, and turn it into sound or turn it into light. So in these ones, for example, the ones behind me, there's a master clock, just like in your phone and computer, which is used in a multiplexer. So there's 3 sensors that are choosing in which 8 channels the signal is going. So you have the 7 light segments plus one that is dark, so 8. And these 3 sensors make up. So as you're moving around and interacting with these 3 sensors, you're also influencing the sculpture in choosing what sounds and what lights to show. So in this sense, it's actually not as much the process of the sculpture, but more the interaction between the audience and the sculpture that creates the result. I'm really interested in ecosystems, and these circuits that these sculptures consist of are sort of ecosystems already. And when you throw a human into that equation, then the human also takes part of the ecosystem, and without the human, then that ecosystem falls apart like a normal ecosystem would. So in praxis, for example, with these 2 in the back, they depend on the humans around them to produce lights and produce sounds, and once the humans are gone, then they shut down. And in the other cases of these sculptures here, you move around and you interact with them, and they create this composition of you walking around, and once you leave, they turn to status quo. But in other sculptures, like the Waldian sculpture, which is hanging on a wall here, everything that you see and hear is directly tied to the inner process of that sculpture. So the idea for the sound on a purely sonic perspective, it's the same as modular synthesizers. So you have oscillators, and you have filters and VCAs that are controlling the timbre and the pitch and the volume. Like in a modular synthesizer, you have different signals interacting with the whole chain of events. So it's pretty much just a synthesizer in one pre-patched version. But basically there's always a constant stream of sound, but external or internal influencers would change the volume or the timbre, so you don't get the feeling that it's a constant stream necessarily.